A commitment to Jesus Christ and the gospel, Christian service to the community, hospitality, and fellowship. These were the ideals held by a handful of members from First Presbyterian Church in Indianapolis when they organized the Third Presbyterian Church in 1851. The new congregation met in a downtown hall on Washington Street between Illinois and Meridian. Under the leadership of Reverend David Stevenson, the church's first pastor, the church soon erected a new building at the northeast corner of Ohio and Illinois. Not only did the church grow in membership, but the congregation also had a desire to minister to the neighborhood surrounding the church through Sabbath schools and new church plants. Upon the departure of Reverend Henry Morey in 1883, a Reverend A.T. Pearson was called to be pastor at Third Presbyterian. He agreed to come upon one condition, that the congregation change its name from Third Presbyterian Church to the Tabernacle Church. The church changed its name, but Pearson changed his mind, and instead of coming to Indianapolis, went to pastor a church in Philadelphia. Disappointed but comforted that both the name change and the episode with Reverend Pearson was God's plan for the church, the members of Tabernacle continued their service to God and to the city. In 1889, a new building was erected on the northeast corner of 11th and Meridian. The ensuing years were marked by a fervor for evangelism and outreach, including more church plants throughout the city, the formation of a boarding school for girls called Tudor Hall, now known as Park Tudor School, and participation in overseas missions. While calling on families on the fast-growing north side of Indianapolis, Dr. J. Ambrose Dunkel saw a need for a Sunday school in that part of the city. So the church purchased land at 34th and Central. The Sunday school was so successful, it was decided to relocate the church and build the Gothic structure that has ever since been home to Tabernacle Presbyterian Church. The cause of Christ has always been the foundation for the activities, missions, and programs of TAB. The 1920s and 30s saw the formation of the Recreation Department, starting with 12 boys playing basketball in the church coal bin, the first vacation Bible schools, and women of the congregation helping to pay for the church mortgage by selling fried peanuts and donuts. The growing congregation, with Dr. Roy Ewing Vale as pastor, saw the addition of ministers to youth, a director of Christian education, and office secretaries, all serving a congregation that supported the cause during World War II and overseeing church growth brought on by the increase of families during the post-war baby boom. Soon TAB was no longer the country suburban church that it was in the 20s. It was becoming a city church, and while innovative ministry and vibrant congregational life was continuing, membership was declining, and a decision had to be made whether to move the congregation to the suburbs or to stay in the neighborhood at 34th and Central. In 1967, the church's long-range planning committee decided to stay, a prayerfully made and God-inspired decision that would define the ministry of TAB over the decades. Growth in Bible study and a deepening of youth ministry during the years of Pastor James Martin. Stable and godly guidance, growth and support for world missions, and the foundation of media ministries under Byron Crozier and co-pastor Bob Hunter. The purchase and establishment of the Allison Christian Center, including the Raphael Health Clinic during the tenure of Frank Kick. And continuing and deepening urban ministry under Peter Larson. All of these wonderful ministries have been the hallmark of Tabernacle Presbyterian Church over the first 150 years of its life. But these are just the bare facts, the dates and events, programs, and missions of TAB, facts that you can find by just looking it up. The real story of TAB can be found in its people, with their living and oral history that captures the character of a church better than any timeline of dates and events. So, for the next few minutes, you are invited to listen to just a few of these men and women who can share what life was like through their stories. Some humorous, some inspirational, some thought-provoking, but always interesting and enlightening. These are just some of TAB's favorite stories.
My early days at Tabernacle were at 11th and Meridian, and one of the things that come to my mind fast is a little Christmas party that they were having down in the basement in the dining room there. And my mother had insisted that I learn a little poem, and I repeat that at the party. I still recall it if you want to put up with it. I am only a little boy, and it is hardly right to call on me to make a speech on such a happy night. A lot of things are on my mind. Some things I can't recall, but all that I have time to say tonight is Merry Christmas to you all.
And I remember as a child, Dr. Dunkel would get out and walk the streets, calling on people, and when he'd see with children, we all held up our fingers like that, and he knew we were from Tabernacle.
J.B. Martin was our Sunday school teacher in high school especially. He was a wonderful teacher that I'll always remember. A few years later, he left the YMCA where he worked and became our Christian education and recreational director when the gym was finished. He just started so many programs for young people, and I just liked him because he'd let us boys in that high school group ask him dumb questions about girls and how we could get not laughed at and what we should do to grow up a little bit. And then we went on into other activities with him through the gymnasium and camp and conference programs. He was there to establish over 100 boys going to Winona Lake, Indiana, at Camp Kosciuszko from the church. And he had plays going on all the time. He was the director of it, and he had 2 or 3 plays every season through the winter months, and I loved to participate in those plays.
Well, it was our family church. That's where we all went. And after we lost our mother, my father got 3 of us ready on Sunday morning, gave us all money for collection and for the building blocks, and took us to church. At that time, we were buying blocks for the new church, for the new sanctuary. And we had little envelopes that we put our money in. Sometimes we only got a penny or 2 from my father, dividing up for 3 of us. But we carried those to church every Sunday and it was called block money.
I joined in 1945, and I was 15 years old. I was a member of Dr. Vale's first confirmation class. But actually, I came to TAB in 1931 as a little girl of 6. Came in and was ushered right upstairs to the primary department with hundreds of little children in the Sunday school. It was bustling with children.
When our sons were ages 2 and 4, we were looking for a new church home. I happened to mention it in front of Fred's grandmother, and she said, "Oh, Mary, go to Tabernacle. The minister there, Dr. Vale, has the most wonderful children's sermon." I said, "They're only 2 and 4. She said, "But they're going to grow." So we came to Tabernacle, and we put the 2-year-old in one side of the hallway down there and the 4-year-old in the other side. And we went into the first doors into the parlor. And Settlers class was going on at that moment. So we sat down. We happened to sit down behind John and Helen Hurt. And who was playing the piano? Marie Price. And Horace, in his uniform of the service, was directing the singing. We fell in love with Settlers, and for 52 years, I have blessed Fred's grandmother for sending us the right way.
All of our friends, we met here at TAB. Through the Sunday school classes, the Christian Home Builders class was such a beautiful interchange of friendships, gathering together for suppers and playing bridge in each other's homes and coming here on Sunday mornings to worship and having lunch after church on Sundays. And our friends were all made right here at TAB. It was very enriching for us.
My parents went here before I was born, so I've always been in TAB. I joined when I was 8 years old. my folks were in charge of taking care of the soldiers and sailors, having them out to dinner during World War II. Ted was one of the ones who came to our house. We met on July the 18th of 43. We were married September the 18th of 43.
Those of us that have been around here for a long time know that Ted O'Baniel was the one that really headed up the communion services and saw to it that they were so perfect, and he wanted everything just right. And on this particular Sunday, we were serving communion, and all of a sudden you heard this tray drop, and you could hear it all over the sanctuary. It dropped down steps. And as I was heading back to the narthex, I wondered, boy, somebody's going to catch the wrath of Ted O'Baniel when they get back there for dropping a tray. And when we got back there, we all of us that had served were saying, wow, just wait. Ted will explode. And pretty soon Ted walked into the narthex, bright red face, and said, I don't want to hear a word out of a one of you. He had dropped a tray going up the steps, and it was poor Ted that had caused and he was so embarrassed, but I kidded Ted about that for years because he was so particular about how communion was served and did a marvelous job of seeing that our communion services were very lovely.
Circle A started just as a circle, like with the Women's Society, but they wanted to make money for missionary societies, or for missionaries, so they started making peanuts. Then they had the oil left over and didn't know what to do with it, so they started making donuts.
When I first started working here, it was in 1969, and Circle A met every Monday down here and worked on the peanuts and donuts. During the Depression, the Circle A paid the interest on the mortgage to help keep the church going, and I always thought what a wonderful thing it was for those ladies who toiled over that hot grease and made those donuts and fixed those peanuts.
Circle A had different fundraising projects over the years, or peanut sales and what have you. But as age set in, why they let up on some of them, but they colored eggs for one Easter and sold them. And so I told Jenny, well, we won't do eggs, we'll buy them through Circle A. And we bought a couple of dozen, and they had failed to cook them completely. And when we cracked them open, the kids were real little. All of this inside ran out, so that's my memory of Circle A.
My memory of Circle A, of course, my viewpoint in those days was different than now. But they were a bunch of old ladies. And the peanuts, they were pretty hard. You had to have good teeth to get through them. And the donuts were greasy. However, the donuts and the peanuts were unique. And they had their own special taste, and I think that's why people got them.
Did you eat them? Did you eat them?
I managed to eat them.
My aunt, Emma Anderson, was church assistant to the pastor for 30 years, retiring in 1933. Emma Anderson, being my aunt, was at our house for Thanksgiving dinner, and she started asking me in front of all the rest of the people, Horace, were you at church last Sunday? Or gave me a specific date on the afternoon, and I couldn't remember the occasion. Well, she said, Bill Baxter reported that you and John Orr were there at the church to play ping pong or something all by yourself. There wasn't anybody else around. But we had a telephone call charged to our account, from somebody called from our phone number to Anderson, Indiana, and there's a bill of 40 cents that's not been paid because we refused to pay it, and nobody will account for it. Do you know anything about that phone call? Well, of course I did. John Orr had called his girlfriend while we were there, and he said, now don't get me involved in this thing, but I had to tell something. Well, I don't remember the outcome of it other than Bill Baxter was the one that passed along the information. He was here at the church all the time, living up on the 3rd floor, and he knew what's going on, and he sure was a 24-hour policeman as well as a wonderful custodian.
We couldn't have had any weddings without Bill Baxter. We had someone in the office, but who also had the rehearsals for the weddings, and then Bill would be the one that would tell the people when they should open the door, when they should go down the aisle or sometime. And one time I had a wedding in the chapel, and there was some little confusion that I didn't open the door and go in. I was waiting for the cue, but the cue never came. And finally, Bill came around, and he said, if you don't open that door and go in there, we're going to be here all night.
Jim Martin started Church on the Terrace. There were 3 or 4 churches that went together. Deacons from here ushered. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
The historic importance of Church on the Terrace is that it was the first cooperative effort of what was commenced as the Tri-Church Council, and which has now expanded to the Mid-North Church Council. And it consisted of Our Redeemer and Tab and North Methodist. So these 3 churches got together, and this was their first venture, really. And the Mid-North Church Council is alive and well today, 30 years later, and that was the beginning.
Practically the first week I was here, the class had their fish fry. And the thing that I remember about particularly was that the fish were fried out on the driveway just outside my little study over here at the door. And they had to raise one window a little bit and then bring an extension in there. And that served very well at the time. But the next morning when I went in there, it had a pretty fishy odor.
See, I had 31 years of session meetings, and there were 7 senior pastors or interims and 1 co-pastor. So I had the pleasure of working with 8 different people or pastors during that period of time. They were, and they all different personalities. There weren't 2 alike. And that was great. They were, and all very, very fine gentlemen.
Dr. Martin was a very funny person. We had a lot of fun with him. He would arrive on the job every morning about 6:30 with a sack full of pecan rolls from the Roslyn Bakery that he would pick up, and everybody had to eat a roll around 9 o'clock. Well, soon we were all putting on weight, and everybody that joined the staff gained 5 pounds right away. So we pleaded for mercy, and he changed to cowboy cookies.
Well, baptisms were, if I could say, the funnest part of the clerk's duties, because you really had the best seat in the house. You may recall that I would enter the east transept door with the parents and child and walk across to the baptismal font in front of the communion table or over on by the platform. And I would wait out there with the parents and baby until I heard the solo to bring the family in. And this particular Sunday we came in and Byron's opened the baptismal font, and it was dry as could be. Someone had failed to put water in it. And I could see Byron whisper to Bob Hunter, and what Byron had whispered was, give a long prayer because I have to go get some water. And so as we bowed our heads for prayer, I saw Byron disappear, and I don't know where he had to go to get the water, but it seemed like an eternity, and Bob was praying on, and at last came back with the water, and we did get the baby baptized, but it was the longest baptism I can remember.
This must have happened in the 80s. Vicki Williams was in the front office one day when a Chinese gentleman stepped up to the counter and began talking to her, but he was speaking in Chinese. He needed help, but Vicki could not understand him. It seemed like the Lord provided just the right person at that moment, because coming up the stairs was a young woman with a baby in her arms who knew Chinese, of all things. It was Sue Pankratz. She had served in China for 5 years, and she was able to help this man. She knew exactly what he needed, and I always felt the Lord provided her coming just at that special time when we needed her.
Probably the most major change that occurred during my time at Tabernacle is when they took women on the boards of the church. When I first went on the station, there were no women on the station, no women in the board of deacons, no women trustees. And I can remember when Jim Martin said to the station, we're going to have to integrate the station with some women. And it didn't go over too well, but we did, and they brought on all the beauty of this church. We couldn't do without the women today. But there was that period of time, and that was a great change in this church. It was, I would suppose, all Presbyterian churches, because women were not permitted to serve.
The friendliness of Tab. Everyone that you met, we spoke, everyone that had a smile. And as I went through being a deacon and so forth all these years since, it's never changed. There's always been that friendliness that you can't find anywhere else. And we've been to several different churches as visitors, not as wanting to change, but Tab has always been a part of our family, and I hope it always will.
It has meant so much to Don and me both, and I realized while he was sick, and eventually the Lord brought him home. Tab was my backbone. I mean, it was something that I depended on, and all the people that were here, I could feel their prayers, and it was wonderful.
It has made me feel that I'm one of God's children, and I want to be that way and reflect all I can to help others that may see problems in that field. I want to always do my part, and the Tabernacle has made it that way.
Well, I see Tab as a place where the Lord can use the few talents I have and what He's taught me, and I've had a lot of advantages in growing spiritually. And Tab is a place where you can use that, because there are places, lots of places for service here.
Tab has been our spiritual life, and it's also been our social life. And I don't think I'd have it any other way.
Carol and I were married here, August the 11th, 1945. Then we started attending here regularly in the early 50s. joined the Christian Home Builders class, and literally almost all of our friends came out of the Christian Home Builders class, and that continues today.
I'm a member of Tabernacle because my wife brought me here. She brought me to the first Christmas service, and we were married here. Our children were raised here. I think the most important thing that I remember about Tab is the outreach it has had. We know how it has affected us, but when we talk about the recreation program, the media program, the missionaries, this has not been a selfish congregation, and the reason that we love it so much beyond our personal advantages are the things that Tabernacle has done unselfishly for the community. The recreation program is known. I taught school for a number of years, and children always said, "Oh, I know where Tabernacle is. That's where I go to Sunday school." And many of the people have said, "Thank goodness Tabernacle stayed where they are with the recreation program. It has been a beacon in the community since it stayed for the children who need to come to church."
Well, Tab is never going to go away. It's in the heart of the city. It has answered so many needs, and it will continue to do so.
Following the name change to the Tabernacle Church and the disappointment of having lost their pastor, a member wrote these words about the congregation in 1883, words that have been true throughout the life of Tab. They were men and women of rare fidelity, to whom the church was not second in affection and interest, but really first, whose devotion to it, because it was their church and the church of their Lord and Master, was a conspicuous and constant element in life, who gave of prayer and time and labor and money that it might be prospered and do valiantly for the cause of God and the gospel, who counted it all joy to bear its burdens and do its work, and whose high pleasure was in its prosperity.